What you will hear the next 40 minutes is actually very precise, concrete cases from what the private sector is doing and the public sector is doing within the blue economy, and how the blue economy has an impact on the whole Arctic region. The Arctic Economic Council that I represent as the director is an independent business organization. So we represent companies from across the Arctic region, also outside the Arctic region. And just to set the scene from this conversation we will have right now, this is how we have been discussing the Arctic region for the past 3 days, these 4 million people. But there's obviously also the rest of the world. And inside of this circle, you have more people living inside of this circle than outside of it. And we all know there's 4 million people in the Arctic, so the question is, how can we help serve the people inside of this circle? We have some mega trends. These mega trends are, challenges that the whole world is facing, not just the Arctic region, but also the people inside the circle. These trends are digitalization, technological breakthroughs, climate change, resource scarcity, rapid urbanization, and changing demographics. So today, this panel will basically go through each one of these mega trends and tell you how companies and organizations today are dealing with these trends and how the blue economy can help solving some of these trends that we're facing. Because the Arctic region, we have fish to feed the world, we have energy to power industries, and we have raw materials in helping the green transformation. The map here is one of my favorite maps. This is trading routes. This is some of the key trading routes from the year 700. So these are the Vikings, how they traded more than 1,000 years ago. And if you see this panel, they're also represented on this route as well. So it's very much been happening about the sea for many, many years. This blue economy is not a new thing. It's been a part of the Arctic for many years. You have whale bladder lighting up the lights of Europe back in the 1800s. Today we have even more shipping routes, new opportunities there. And we have most of the population living in the northern hemisphere. And the Arctic connects all of these people. So we're in the center of the world, and I think that's important to remember when we meet here. Another thing that is important to remember is that most goods today are traded on the sea. We are depending on the sea, it's our main trading routes, and that's again why the Arctic is important. I'll just give you 3 cases. So I'm living in Tromsø in northern Norway, in the Arctic part of northern Norway, and one company here is Arctic Science. The Arctic Science has existed since the 1980s. And what you see there is their stock rates. And clearly something happened with their stocks around 1.5 years ago, around 2 years ago. And what happened was that there came a pandemic. And what Arctic Science has done for many, many years is taking enzymes from the cod liver. So basically from the fish, from the cod liver, they're taking enzymes, and these enzymes are being used now today in some of the best COVID-19 tests. This is a technology not from the cod fillet, but from the cod liver. And today, they make money making some of the best COVID tests in the world. Another company from North Norway is Polaris. It's a very old prawn company. They have been selling Norwegian prawn for many, many years. Some years ago, they realized they were throwing away a lot of their, prawns, prawn shells, all the waste, the prawn's head. And they said, what can we do with that? And what they realized that they can actually make hard medicine. So today, this traditional company has started a breakout company called Marialis, and they're making hard medicine from the same products that they used to throw away many years ago. So they suddenly took their classic product, had some waste, and they made the waste into high value. We will hear more about that later as well. The last one here is another Norwegian company. This fellow on the left-hand side, is the most plentiful animal in the ocean. And some people in Norway has found out how to make medicine for that. So now they make this food supplement using this species. So let's get into it. I've been talking for way too long already. I want to hear from some of the cases from some of the representatives of the panel. And what we will do is we will go through each mega challenge, mega trend that I showed you, and we'll just hear what is actually happening today in the Arctic and how is the Arctic helping with this. So the first one was digitalization and technological breakthroughs. You know, data is the new oil, and I was even told that it's not the new oil because oil has a bad rep. So data is important, very important, and we've never had more data than we have now. The question is, how do we use this data the best possible way? How can data make a difference in the Arctic, especially when it comes to the blue economy? And for that, I will hand over to you, Leslie, and I would like to ask you how your company is working with data and the blue economy and how that whole thing is connected. But please introduce yourself and your company. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. So my name is Leslie Canavera. I'm from PolArctic. We're an Alaska Native-owned company. We're out of Alaska. And what we do is we build custom artificial intelligence and machine learning models for the Arctic. And we have three main focus areas that we kind of work in. The first being sea ice forecasting, the second being nearshore bathymetry, and the third being aquaculture and mariculture habitat mapping. In our aquaculture habitat mapping, that I just kind of want to elaborate a little bit more on. We recently finished a pilot project in Nunavut, Canada, where we were able to take data from remote sensing, university-collected trawl data, and traditional indigenous knowledge and combine them to use that as a training set for an AI model to extrapolate for the community to understand where they should be looking for other food security issues or food sources for food security for the community. And so with this was a great example of what the Nunavut government was able to do with this Nunavut Coastal Resource Inventory, talking to the elders of the village, collecting their stories and their data to be able to take that and digitize it, where we were then able to use it. And this kind of shows this great public-private partnership with the government of Nunavut, the World Wildlife Foundation, the Nunavut Fishery Association, and our small business, where we were able to do this for the community. And I think that's a really important thing to talk about a little bit, because as an Alaska Native, I've heard a lot of people talk about incorporating indigenous knowledge, but I haven't heard a lot of people talking about the protections that go with that. And so I think recently the World Intellectual Protection Organization, WIPO, published a thing on how do we protect our indigenous knowledge that may not be patentable or otherwise ways that we traditionally protect it. And I think when we're talking about including these indigenous knowledge in these models and the development of the Arctic, we need to keep in mind that it needs to benefit the people who actually live there. And there's a lot of different data sources through remote sensing, through sensors, all of those we pay for. And so we need to make sure that we're compensating the people who live there because this is theirs. So that was a great example of how the community could benefit from their own traditional knowledge, even in areas with climate change, being able to correlate the different factors from remote sensing to identify some of those changes. Another fun thing that happened out of that is we were able to identify an uncharted subsurface seamount or reef in the area. And this affects all of the circulation models that would be beneficial to the community for knowing the nutrient flows that are going through there, in addition to keeping it safe for the community if they ever take ships through there. So it's important to kind of see those kind of trends, the digital world and what it can provide and how it can help the communities of the Arctic really adapt.
Yeah, so we all know there's not that many, nautical sea charts that might not be completely updated. So what you do is you take satellite data and you analyze it and you crunch it and you use artificial intelligence and machine learning and traditional knowledge. What about in you, Patrick, and Bryndís, in your organizations? How is that affecting digitalization, technologies, new research? How is that affecting your companies, your organization, Bryndís?
Well, technological breakthroughs are, of course, changing the whole game. Everything that we're seeing in Iceland within the fishing industry, all the added value that we're getting, it's coming through technological breakthroughs in, improved hardware, processing technologies, in the biotech, and so on. So it's absolutely game-changing. Yeah.
And Patrick, how are the members of your cluster, how are they feeling this trend?
Well, I mean, for every successful venture that we've come across, it starts with data. Every failed venture usually doesn't. And so the digitalization of that, the wider access to data and information helps people to make better decisions on the front end, which is very important as markets shift and new technologies come on the scene and when people are seeking to benefit from such. So yeah, that's the beginning of every good story.
And is the data available? I mean, do you have the data? Maybe I should ask you, Leslie, do you have all the data you need? Or is there any wish you need for more data to develop your business and help the Arctic region?
So we like to call the Arctic a data desert. And in a lot of other places in the world, you have a lot more sensors and buoys and in situ data, and you get that collected a lot more. In addition to, there's just more people there, there's more observations, there's more things going on. So you have a lot more data that's generated and collected and available. And I think it's important to try to look at what we do have and use it as much as we can. A fun example is that through imagery, we can tell the velocity of a wave and how fast it's traveling through static imagery by actually going and diving into more of the actual data. So being able to find what you have and kind of parse it in a way that you're able to use more of it. But then also, like, as we're looking at how we expand and grow is let's put a plan in place for collecting that data and what's going to be really beneficial to the companies and the people that are going to be operating there.
Thank you. I think we will go to the next megatrend, which was climate change and resource scarcity. And I would like to focus, so we have all talked about this number. I think I've heard this from the stage a number of times the past 3 days, but I would like to focus on the resource scarcity part of this, because one thing is climate change, and the world is changing, but we are also in need of more resources, that's for sure. And Bryndís, that's probably one thing that Mattis is working with is, how can we use our resources better? Maybe you could explain what Mattis is and what you do with this.
Sure, thank you. So, hi everyone, my name is Bryndís Björnsdóttir and I come from Mattis, which is a research and development company here in Iceland. So we're owned by the government and our role is to support the Icelandic food production industries to produce more food, more valuable food, safe food, and to generate more value out of what we're producing. So that's our role, and through this, of course, we're connecting with almost everyone within the food production value chain here in Iceland. And of course, we are looking into more resources, but I think the major shift has been that, through sustainable fishing, we've actually had to do more with less resources. And that's something that we need to maybe prioritize before starting to dive into more resources. Resources is what we can do with what we're already catching. And that's, I think, the strong story coming out of Iceland and other Arctic regions, is that from 1980 until today, we're fishing maybe only like half of the cod that we, which is our primary fish species. We're catching almost half of what we used to do, but the value is about the same. So we're doubling the value of the biomass. And this has been done through a variety of actions. I think the most important one is that it's the willingness to adapt to this, resourcefulness and collaborations. So every part of the value chain has been worked on. From when and where to catch the fish, what happens as soon as it comes on board, how it's treated, how it's processed in land. We're getting much more of the fillet itself. We have all these great technologies and automatizations to cut each fillet exactly how, in a way to get as much value out of it as possible. A lot of work has been done on increasing the shelf life of the products, and that's really important. Both for us here in a remote location, having we export 98% of what we catch, and we're far away from our markets. So through a lot of R&D, several days, 4 or 5 days, have been added to the shelf life of a cod fillet, for example. And that makes it possible for us to ship fresh fish, and fresh fillets maybe get twice the value of frozen fillets. And we can also ship them to our markets. So we don't have to fly everything out of Iceland anymore. And that is a huge economic aspect, but of course diminishes the carbon released in the transport. And then added on that is the added value through all of the side streams. And I mean, we have examples there where we can say that the side products are now making more money than the fillet that we started out with in the beginning as a primary product. And
could you give an example of that, of where you have discovered, you used to sell just the fillet?
Yeah.
Is there any side product that you could highlight as an example of what can you actually do with technology?
Yeah.
And when you realize you have less resources, what comes out of that? What innovation comes out of that?
So my favorite example, I think, is the cod skin. Something that was thrown into sea or into landfill, but now is a really valuable, exciting product. And there's demand for cod skin. So, I mean, initially you can dry it, and then you have snacks that you can sell as human food. You could freeze it into pet food or into feed. And then we, dive further, and we have a company in Iceland. I mean, the demand for marine collagen, which you can get easily from which you can get from the cod skin, is rising everywhere. There's huge interest in that, and there are companies here in Iceland that are producing collagen from fish skin. You have the Nordic leather, the fish skin leather, which is a fantastic product, and we heard yesterday about the fish skin chandeliers. And then, of course, we have a company in the Westfjords, which is Qvist, which is actually producing these medical products to heal up wounds. And it's a really fast-growing, impressive company. And I mean, they have increased the value of the fish, single fish caught, I don't know, hundreds of times.
So remember that next time you eat the skin of the fish, that's the most expensive piece of the cod you're eating. So forget about the cod fillet, focus on the skin. You're eating the future. Leslie, I just want to ask about climate change as well, because there's a lot of data, and you're an expert on artificial intelligence and machine learning and so on. When it comes to climate change, how can we use technologies in the Arctic to predict some of where the fish is going, or sea ice, or how can it be used in the blue economy?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do is take artificial intelligence and use it to forecast the sea ice. And that's because AI is really strong at forecasting and identifying trends in nonlinear systems. So when you see climate change, it's pushing the climate in uneven ways and things that are hard to chart and map and understand. But what AI can do is take the data and be able to identify those trends and then forecast it further out than we've seen before. We have a great project that we've started with the Alaska Ocean Cluster and the Bering Sea crabbers to be able to identify the sea ice as it comes down, to be able to tell them where and when it's going to be. So this way they can go out, pull out their crab pots, reduce ghost gear, reduce plastic in the ocean, and save themselves money by being able to know that and be able to forecast that.
I think I will just go to the next one, rapid urbanization and changing demographics. And this is something we're experiencing everywhere, also in the Arctic. People are moving to the cities, demographics are changing as well. We have a growing population. They need to eat fish. 7% of the world's protein intake today comes from fish. And the whole economics of the cities is changing as well. And one thing, especially in the Arctic region, where, again, we have 4 million people, is collaboration, partnerships. We have to learn from each other. We have to be inspired by each other. And I think what Patrick is doing at the New England Ocean Cluster is a great example of this. And also is moving a little bit further south. And also talking about keeping jobs and all of this. So Patrick, maybe you could introduce both what your cluster is doing, what the background, how you got inspired to do this, and where the future is going for the demographics of the region and how the clusters can help keeping societies and communities alive.
Sure. Well, again, thank you for having me here. And my name is Patrick Arnold. I'm a co-founder and CEO of the New England Ocean Cluster, which is not in the Arctic, and it's not even in England. You know, and I'd like to start by saying, why is Maine here? Why have we come for the last 6 years? And it really started with AIM-SCIP in 2013. So a lot of talk at these conferences about infrastructure and investment in transportation and logistics. So we have a theory we call cost-based geography. It helps explain this phenomenon. When you go to the airport with 200 euro in your pocket, you might get from Keflavik to London, you might get from Keflavik to Oslo. From a cost perspective, you are equivalently close to those locations. When AIM-SCIP came to Maine, Tromsø, Norway, where you are presently, which is 300 miles north of the Arctic Circle, is as close to us in Maine as central New Jersey, which is a 5-hour truck ride. That's the leading deciding factor for economic decision-making is cost. So the New England Ocean Cluster is a for-profit private sector enterprise in partnership with Thor Sigfusson from the Iceland Ocean Cluster, Sjávarklassen, which is just across the harbor here. And the clusters are really focused on renting offices and having members pay into this community who are engaged together in the collaborative exercise of value-adding to the resource. So as you just talked about climate change and resource reduction, a resource-driven economy is a race to the bottom. A value-add economy, higher margins for the same resource, higher paying jobs, more value associated with that resource, that really delivers back to each community harvesting said resource what that community should benefit from. And we've seen that the only thing lacking to do that local to the resource is knowledge and wherewithal. But yesterday, a good friend of mine, Anders Oskol, talked about, from the Reindeer Herders Association, he talked about sort of an ancient contract that the Sami have with the reindeer, where they say, the reindeer give us everything, and we take care of the reindeer. We build pasture. I would posit that we have the same contract, whether people like it or not, that the world gives us everything. This earth gives us, nature gives us everything. And we break the contract when we don't take care of it. So I would also say oil's not the new data. It's sort of like the new whale blubber.
Exactly.
With the ocean clusters, we work with entrepreneurs, universities, big companies and small alike, artists and engineers, to come together to value add on the resource. So when you talk about carices, it takes a village to raise a new product like that. In Maine, we have lobster, certainly, as a fishery. We went to Matís first in Iceland, saying, you know, what are the things we need to know about this in order to value add? And we have a spin-off company out of the New England Ocean Cluster now who's extracting a tiny bit of marine glycoprotein from the lobster and making an eczema skin cream that is really effective at treating eczema, dry, harsh, red skin. So if you do that community by community, then each community now has the opportunity to benefit from its resource. I would say in the Arctic, from what we've observed with the folks in Tromsø and Greenland and Iceland that we visit with and work with, is that there really is a blueprint. I know we're here for the blue economy, but there's a blueprint in the Arctic for how to live sustainably moving forward. Economy is a major part of that. And as urbanization and changing demographics, people are moving to cities more and more, there's new products that are necessary. We don't shift that consumption, we need to provide new products for it.
And I think that's relating to the changing demographic. There's a challenge of people leaving the region, you know, people moving away from traditional fishing villages and so on. And I think there's a need for role models. And what we have here is, you know, saying, you know, traditional fishing industry that employed people for centuries, you know, there's also other branches. You know, you can use satellite data, you can use the state-of-the-art R&D, you can, you know, be an entrepreneur, an artist, or so on. Like, do you feel that, you know, all of what you guys are doing, is that helping people to stay in the region, and what more does it take? You know, what do you need from policymakers and to make sure that people are staying in the region, working within this field? I will take it from one end to another.
Yeah, I think it's the network, it's the connections, it's allowing small businesses with innovative ideas to be able to progress and grow, and having public-private partnerships and different funding sources for those really helps to be able to get those technologies through kind of that valley of death of trying to get from like an idea and a concept to a product where you're selling it and you have customers. So.
And talking about the valley of death and keeping keeping communities. I mean, how do we get research and how do we create entrepreneurs? How do we link this?
Yeah, I think we've come quite far in Iceland, because you were asking about role models, and I mean these added value companies, they are more or less located all around Iceland. And I think we have around 150 startups in the blue economy in Iceland, and they're all over Iceland. So I think definitely we have these in place here, and they are so important that the young people, that the educated people can see a future where they come from. So.
And just for you, those of you who are confused, we have, and that's why I wanted to introduce you now while you're speaking, before I hand over to Patrick as well, to commenting on job creation and job growth. So we have gotten a graphic artist to draw a summary of the panel so far. So this will be shared. So all of you that didn't take all the notes you wanted, you can definitely find this on the Arctic Economic Council's social media afterwards, which is a summary of everything that's been talked about, and you can also meet the panelists afterwards. But Patrick, what about, you know, the cluster and creating jobs in Maine as well, and keeping jobs? Because, you know, the seafood industry is changing, it's becoming industrialized, it's bigger, it's on a larger scale, and so on. Yep. Well, what's the role of the cluster in this?
Sure. Well, first, I'm grateful that a beard has been added to my face. But, you know, we abide by the World Bank definition of the blue economy, and that is that it must be profitable. Start there. Must be environmentally sustainable. It must be culturally inclusive of the workforce, local to the resource. That last one is a really, really important piece to start with, because it's really about the jobs local to the resource. So in our case, our major resource for the New England Ocean cluster is not our resource, it's our market. Within 600 kilometers of our Hus, our Shavar class, and our New England Ocean Cluster site in Portland, Maine, we have 60 million people. So for Arctic products, for Arctic economic blue economy products coming from the north, we have office tenants from Norway and Iceland who have put a sales representative in the Hus. We have others who are bringing their technology from the far north to create US subsidiaries to develop their companies, but that capital is also going back to their homes in Norway and Iceland and Greenland and other places. So it really is, as far as I'm concerned, critical as a tenant to create those jobs local to the resource. And if we can serve a role in that, then we shall. But that's the ocean cluster way of thinking.
Thank you. I think, so we have 1 minute left, and I really want to summarize that we have been talking for the past 3 days about sustainable economic development, sustainability, and so on. And I really think that this panel highlights, you know, how we become sustainable and we make money from it. And sustainability is also about the people living in the region. You know, it doesn't matter that we talk about sustainability if there's no people living there. And it doesn't matter if we talk about sustainability if there's no innovation. So we have innovation, we have profit here, and we have the people involved, and that's the key. So that's what we hope you got out of this panel, that you were inspired, that you heard that there's actually a lot of things happening in the Arctic, Obviously, still looking for investors, still looking for competences. So feel free to ask any questions in the break. We have a coffee break now. Feel free to ask any questions to the panelists afterwards. Thank you very much.